So tell me, what is happening with Otedola and Tony Elumelu? Give us a recap.
Otedola basically was trying to get stuff off his chest, saying that this is the history we had together. This guy stabbed me in the back, and now everyone is interpreting I tried to get back at him by taking over his company. 20 years ago, he gave Elumelu about $20 million in order to, getting his start in investing in companies, I think like UBA or so.
Some people say that there are no real friends in business, right?
The last thing here is don't wrong or backstab your friends.
Bam!
Because remember, Otedola was bankrupt at some point.
When? How do you think Tony Elumelu paid for it? Welcome to Business in Nigeria, the podcast that equips you with the knowledge and tools you need to start and grow your business in Nigeria. If you are an entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the Nigerian business landscape, this podcast is for you. Our aim is to provide you with the inside scoop, the ins and outs, the key details, and the nitty-gritty of doing business in Nigeria. Join us as we explore the challenges, opportunities, and best practices for navigating the Nigerian business landscape. I'm your host, Kenim O, and let's get into the video. Rotus Oddiri, nice to have you.
Great to be here. So on April 11th, there was a big purchase of shares in Transcorp. Transcorp is a conglomerate that is a company in Nigeria that owns a number of different assets in different businesses. They own the Transcorp Hotel in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. They also own a number of power assets. Funny enough, one of them in Ugeli in Delta State, where I happen to be from. And so there was this big purchase of shares, about 2.3 billion shares on the stock exchange that were bought. And everybody's scrambling around saying, who bought the shares? Who bought the shares? Now, by the way, Tony Elumelu is the chair of Transcorp, right? He is the head honcho over there. And we found out later, about a day or two later, that it was fellow billionaire Femi Otedola who bought those shares in Transcorp. It made him the largest single shareholder in the company. He had about 5.5% of the shares of the company. The more shares you buy, the more control you have based on your ownership. So everyone starts buzzing like, oh, is he trying to take over the company? What's happening? What's going on? And the largest shareholder is in Transcorp as of 2022 was an entity called UBA Holdings or so. UBA nominees, sorry. And that, so the Elumenu has an interest there. So they had about 9%. So he was right up there in second place. He was the largest single individual shareholder, and overall in second place, the largest. So everybody's talking about a corporate takeover. They're like, is he trying to muscle Tony Elumelu out of the company? And so essentially what Tony Elumelu did was later on through another entity called HH Capital, which some people think stands for Heirs Holdings. Heirs Holdings is another entity that Tony Elumelu runs. So he's the chair of United Bank of Africa, UBA, one of the biggest banks in Nigeria. He's the chair of Transcorp, the conglomerate. He heads Heirs Holdings. So he's got a lot of entities. So Heirs Holdings made a big purchase in Transcorp shares, taking their shareholdings to I think about 25%. So it was a really large share purchase. And then they were like, okay, so there was a tussle for leadership. And so in the end, about a week or so ago, Otedola sold his shares in Transcorp. He was bought out. Now the rumor is that he was bought out at a premium to what he bought the shares for. Transcorp shares, by the way, haven't been very exciting. They've been trading at about 1 naira per share. And when Otedola came in, it rocketed up to like 2 naira 90 kobo. So it was a big jump. So basically, he made a lot of money. Otedola and himself came to some kind of agreement. He sold the shares for much higher than he bought them, and apparently made a lot of money from it. Now, the reason why he said he wanted to buy into Transcorp was he said he felt the company was not being run at its optimal level. And just to give you an example real quick, Otedola runs Girigo Power PLC. Girigo Power is a power generation company. And just not to get too technical, right? The total assets of Girigo that Otedola runs It's about 176 billion naira as of their 2022 financials. So think about number 176 billion. That's very cool. Transcorp's total assets are about 442 billion. So Transcorp's assets, the number of assets they own, is like 2 times the size of Girigu. But yet, on the stock exchange, Girigu's market cap, that is the value of all the shares that they own, is about it touched 800 billion at one point. Meanwhile, Transcorp is about 100 billion. So Transcorp's assets are bigger than Girigu, but Transcorp's market cap on the NGF, the Nigerian stock exchange, are much smaller. So Otedola was basically saying that, listen, this company is not being run optimally. I can change things. He has a reputation as a, like Carl Icahn in the States, an activist investor. Then there was a bromance that happened on Instagram where, Otedola put out a post after Tony Elumelu went on television saying that he appreciates his investments. He likes seeing African investors or indigenous investors investing in the company. They did the whole, one love, fist bump. But then 5 days ago, Otedola then came out.
Yeah, so that's what I saw. So Otedola came out and wrote this long message. Yeah, so go on.
Otedola then comes out and says that, well, there's been some history between the two of them. 20 years ago, he gave Elumelu about $20 million in order to, get his start in investing in companies, I think like UB or so. And then the key part is that he accused him of backstabbing. He basically said that he confided in Elumelu and said he wanted to buy that Ugili power plant that Transcorp owns. And then Elumelu went behind his back and bid for it and bought it. So he's claiming breach of trust that, Elumelu basically stabbed him in the back years ago. And that's so that looks like that's why this is happening right now. But
okay. But Elumelu basically said that he likes him. That's his brother. That basically, he's the only person that he follows on Instagram. So that must mean something.
Yeah.
So what is your take on that? And why do you think Femi went out and just sort of like exposed this detail that was shocking to a lot of people?
So Elumelu was Elumelu is running these large public companies, and he basically wanted to put a friendly face on the relationship between him and Otedola. And there are pictures of them from years ago where they're shaking hands and smiling and so on and so forth. So him saying that I only follow my wife and Otedola was supposed to suggest that, well, we've got a great relationship. But then Otedola basically was trying to get stuff off his chest, saying that this is the history we had together. This guy stabbed me in the back. And now everyone is interpreting I tried to get back at him by taking over his company and basically running it to a more optimal level that I feel it should be run at. But then he bought, he bought himself. He bought him out.
So did he admit that he tried to take his company? Did Otedola admit that he tried to do it in that post?
No, he did not. But actions speak louder than words. If you have an investor who comes and buys a big chunk of your company, and by the way, here's a little spicy stuff. There's something called an AGM, an annual general meeting that Transcorp had. Now, Otedola was shut out of that meeting. He wasn't allowed to be part of it. It was held on Zoom. It was virtual. And so it suggested that they didn't want anybody coming in to spring any surprises in a public annual meeting that journalists and other investors would be looking at, because he had his statement prepared where he was talking about essentially how the company should be run, which could have embarrassed them. So they kind of shut him out of that. So, he didn't come out and say he wanted to take over, but if you're going to spend billions of naira buying up shares in a company, it suggests that, you've got those plans.
How has this been resolved now? Tony Elumelu essentially got him out, kicked him out.
Well, when he said kicked him out, he bought, so this thing, he had to pay a lot of money to Otedola to buy the shares that Otedola had bought in the company. So he had to buy him out. Now, there's
but the problem with that is that how does he do that if Otedola does not agree, or did Otedola agree to let him buy him out?
He did agree. So basically, Otedola spends upwards of 3-point-something more billion buying the shares at a share price. Transcorp was going for about 1 naira something kobo at the time. So now he said, okay, fine, you want to buy me out, you want me to sell you the shares so you can take them back. You're going to pay me more money than what I paid for the shares. And basically I come out, with I hit the lottery. So he basically made a lot of money exiting his position.
So how much do you know?
No, see, that's the thing. The Transcorp, the word from Transcorp is that they didn't pay him too much. They paid at the existing share price. But word on the street is that he exited at a much higher price than what he bought. So nobody knows the exact figures. But basically for Elumelu to say, okay, listen, I don't want any more issues. Just let me compensate you for the shares, and you can just exit quietly. Yeah. You'd have to pay a premium for that.
So what is your take on sort of like, the business or going public in Nigeria? Because this is not the first company, that I've heard that, there was a takeover,
Yeah.
So talk to me about that landscape and how can entrepreneurs feel confident in their business to keep to hold their ownership in their businesses.
So these are publicly traded companies, and basically the way this is being framed is like two elephants that are fighting, right? Because these are two big billionaires, and as you can see with what Otedola, the statements he put out, there was some history here. So you've got to put that within the context of what happened between the two of them. Now, I think you were referring to with other companies that happened with First Bank, where Otedola himself also had some sizable holdings in there. He bought shares and so on. There was a bit of a tussle. But that's just him as an activist investor feeling like he can change how companies are run. And he got board seats on First Bank and so on and so forth to allow him to exert his control. For entrepreneurs in Nigeria, as far as going public, we need to have, not enough of them are going public. So we don't have that many companies on an annual basis that are going public on the Nigerian exchange. It's basically because of anything from listing requirements to whether or not they even get any benefits from listing on the exchange. Now the exchange is promising. Geregu was the most recent company. Funny enough, Otedola's Geregu Power listed in October of 2022 or so. So that was the last big company that went private, from going private, went public, But that's Otedola is a big guy. The smaller ones, we're not seeing that many. Since then, we haven't had, to my knowledge, another listing on the exchange. So,
even aside from going public, but even just getting investors in your company and having a takeover, because that does happen also.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to entrepreneurs, like in terms of just to protect their businesses? And it's not every investment that you take, right?
Yeah, it's not every investment that you take, but look, I gotta tell you, for even on the tech side, right? So you've got a lot of tech startups that have a lot of great ideas, but being able to execute on a daily basis is tough because of the business environment. So I tell you, a lot of tech startups that we see in Nigeria, they are looking for an exit. That's if they're looking to be bought out. Again, for Elumenu and Otedola are operating at the highest level possible. These are the biggest of the big. So when you come down to the smaller entrepreneurs and the smaller companies that are not as big as Transcorp, are not as big as Geregu, some of them are looking to be bought out because the operating environment is pretty tough. But to answer your question straight up, if you want to make sure you're protecting your company, it might be better to stay private, because if you do go public, then any shareholder, yourself, myself, anybody that's watching this can go and buy shares in a company. If they buy enough of them, they can take over. So you have to leverage, or rather make a decision as to what the decision, if it's good for your corporation to go public. Now, why do you go public? You go public so you can raise money from that's why it's called initial public offering. You offer shares to the public in exchange for their money to fund your operations for your company. Now, if you're not doing very well, they either abandon you, or if they feel that you're not, running yourself properly, they will buy up shares and take over. So those are the risks that you have to take. You just have to make sure that you're operating properly in order to keep your shareholders satisfied.
Absolutely. And then what do you think this says about these sort of big billionaires, kind of like showing this, face in public of them being friends, but behind the scenes, it's quite rough and rugged. What's your take on that aspect of it?
They have to keep up an image, right? Nobody wants to create an image of, acrimony or dislike, or backstabbing. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? And in Otedola's case, if you felt you've been wronged years ago, you, as a human being, you take your time and you plan your revenge, so to speak. You know,
But that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did, right?
That's exactly what he did. You know, and because remember, Otedola was bankrupt at some points, and he even accused
When?
like what, a couple 20 or so years ago, a while back, years
Okay.
ago, he accused Elumelu
Right.
of taking his shares as Otedola shares in UBA to finance loans that he owned and so on and so forth. So the thing is, he came up, he bounced back, he rebuilt back his fortune, and so now he's in a powerful position to where he can exert his influence on companies if he feels like he wants to turn them around. But from a PR perspective, at Elumelu will want to, so on the face of things, make people think that, hey, listen, we're friends. At that, they are friends, but friends have disagreements, right? I've had, friends that you fought with, but you make up.
But like they say, some people say that there are no real friends in business, right?
Exactly.
Especially when you're in the same business.
Exactly. What you guys, and here's the thing. Another thing is that there's something Elumelu was asked about was whether he's going to spin off Transcorp power from the Transcorp conglomerate. So we know we have a new president coming in. There are plans that could possibly see Nigeria's power sector revamped. So you've got a lot of eyes on power assets in Nigeria. They could be worth a whole lot more down the line. And so someone say, well, that could have been the reason why you saw that tussle between the two of them. So like you said, you say that just reminded me that, look, if there's no friends in business, people are looking ahead and seeing what power assets could be valued later on. So everybody's jostling to, increase their positions in power assets so they can make more money down the road.
Right. So I guess the lesson is for any entrepreneur watching is don't go public or just be careful who you work with, or what would you say the lesson is?
So the lesson here is don't wrong or backstab your friends.
Bam.
Yeah.
That's one.
Because
That's a big
you don't
one.
know tomorrow and you don't know when they will, what the future is like. So that's the thing. So treat your friends well. If your friend confides in you about something, don't use that against them. I use it as information to now use to go and enrich yourself. That's one of the lessons from there. But I would, if you, the thing is, as far as going public, before you go public, make sure that you can withstand the pressure of being a public company, because you have shareholders that are going to be making demands. They want you to be more profitable. They want your company run this way or that way. You probably want to stay private until you grow to a level where you can say, okay, we're big enough to where we can list on the exchange. Because the other side of me, I do want to see more companies listing on the Nigerian exchange. That's the NGX. But it's just not happening now because of a whole lot of factors. So treat your friends right.
Well, that too, but also this idea that somebody could take your company if you don't need the money in that way.
Right.
Then it makes sense to just be a private company, because it's not always the best decision.
Indeed, very much so. Very, very much.
Yeah.
So it was very nice corporate drama for the Nigerian business community. We really enjoyed it. We wish it didn't end, but I'll be enjoying it very much.
But they resolved it, and it looks like Otedola has come out with some big money. I wonder how much.
Gotta be in the multi-billions based on
Naira.
So he made out because if you think about the media storm around it, it's still a trending topic, all the talk. So Elumenu was like, listen, I need to tamper this thing down, so let me just pay this guy off.
How do you think Tony Elumelu paid for it?
Well, I mean, he's got to pay from essentially his holdings, So he himself has, as the chair, he's going to own a sizable number of shares. Those shares are worth a lot in stock businesses in different entities. So you have to dip into his pockets and make that payment in order to get Otedola out there.
All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover on this subject?
Look, as far as Nigeria is concerned, I hope we have more billionaires, right? I want to see you interview, more up and coming on billionaires in Nigeria down the line. I just, I hope for a better business environment, a more conducive business environment that means more multi-millionaires and billionaires in Nigeria. And I just hope for more prosperity for the country down the line. So we can have more stuff like
I agree with this. Right. Yes, I agree. And I agree with this, but we also have to remember that this is it's not novel to Nigeria, right? This sort of we have so many, even like the richest man in the world, Arnaud Anwar, he stole, what company did he steal? I can't remember. He
LVMH?
basically bought right, is it LVMH that he stole?
Oh, that's like
He basically in the stock market.
yeah.
He basically
Stories around that,
right.
yeah.
So
It happened.
right, so it's not new to Nigeria. It's not novel to Nigeria. Everything that happens in Nigeria happens everywhere else, you know. But maybe sometimes it feels a little bit more extreme in Nigeria. But definitely you have to make sure. Sometimes you have to make sure you're prepared for these things, that you know some of the issues that you can face, so you can protect yourself to hedge against these risks.
You know, cross the T's and dot the I's, and just make sure your company is running smoothly at all times. For sure.
All right, thank you so much, Rotus.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate it, and keep doing it. You guys, you're doing a great podcast, and enjoy watching your material. Thank you so much.
Well, that's all for today's episode of Business in Nigeria. We hope you found this informative and helpful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us on our website or on our social media. Don't forget to subscribe. Yes, subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our Instagram, Twitter, all of those. Subscribe. The more subscriptions we get, the more incentive we have to make more episodes, and the more guests we'll be able to bring on to educate you about navigating the business landscape in Nigeria. So subscribe for more valuable insights and tips on starting and growing your business in Nigeria. Until next time, stay motivated, stay informed, and keep pursuing your entrepreneurial dreams in Nigeria.